Welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast, where trauma survivors become healthy thrivers. Each month, we'll feature a theme in the trauma recovery and empowerment field. To promote your recovery, healing, and learning how to build dreams, here's your host, Karen Robinson, transformational coach and therapist.
Hello, and welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast. Today, my guest is John P. Boyle. He is an engineer, entrepreneur, executive advisor, and author from Appalachian. He's a graduate of the Kiski School in West Virginia University and Harvard Business School. That's really impressive. He has led infrastructure businesses and serves on boards. John published Appalachian Kid in 2023, and most recently in 2026, this year, he has published Invisible Wounds, Understanding and Healing from Complex PTSD. John, welcome to my show, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Karen. I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome sauce. John, let's start with why are you taking time out of your busy life to be on podcast? What is that about?
This is my passion. I believe that if you're not doing something every day to help someone, you're wasting your time on earth. And my experience in life it's been good in many aspects, but it's also been very challenging in others. So while I've been successful in business and I've been successful in my academic and my book endeavors, I was challenged very early in life and really struggled. I grew up in a violent home. My mother was a perpetrator of violence. It was chronic, it was frequent, and it was uncontrolled. And from my earliest memory until around 15, altercations, physical violence, verbal violence, fear on top of that was commonplace in my home. And around 15, I left my home and went to a boarding school in Pennsylvania, neighboring Pennsylvania in Pittsburgh. And I was able to remove myself from the situation, but the war was still going on in my own head for years. And I was exhibiting around the time of 8th, 9th, 10th grade many symptoms of what I now know as complex PTSD. But until I was 36, I had no idea I had that disorder. I knew I had something. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know why I had insomnia. I didn't know why I would be fearful at the drop of a hat and feel like someone just called in a bomb threat, but it's a beautiful Sunday afternoon. And so I had all these symptoms for years. I sought medical help for over a decade and was misdiagnosed with many things I don't have. So my journey has been, while it's been successful, it's also been very troubling behind the curtain. And I just want to share my experience, one, to demystify trauma, and two, to help others who have been in a situation like mine, but maybe haven't found healing or the right diagnoses, which is why I share what I do.
Which is incredibly important. John, do you feel comfortable? So anything I ask you, if you don't want to talk about, it's perfectly fine.
Sure.
But I'm curious about a father figure. I'm curious if you had siblings in the home. Can you say a little more about just family dynamics?
Oh, sure. So still have three younger sisters. And growing up, I was more of the lightning rod for the strife than I believe my sisters were. And thankfully, I believe that was the case as well. I wouldn't want to watch them going through what I went through to the degree I went through it and just stand there and not do anything about it. And that was a troubling dynamic. When they were picked on, that did bother me severely. My father was a businessman. My mother stayed home and took care of 4 children. And both of those jobs are not easy, and I'm not judging my parents. My father knew what was going on in the house to a certain degree. He did push back at times, and at other times he swept it under the rug. And I had conversations with him. He passed a few years ago. I had conversations about this before he passed and really didn't get his full viewpoint on the issue or why certain things were the way they were. But his situation was not an easy one to be in. Growing up in the middle of nowhere in West Virginia, if I would have been put in the foster system, I don't know that my life would have been any better, Karen. So when I look back on it, I don't hope and wish for a different past. What's happened has happened. But it
Right.
was a very troubling dynamic. It was very hard to understand. And look, a lot of it was internalized. And when this happens to a child or a group of children, it doesn't bring out the best in people. It makes you think that the world is weighted in a very bad way, or that you're
Yeah.
not lovable. And you carry a lot of, you know what toxic shame is, but it's that shame from childhood where you have this confusion of you have a caregiver that gives you your basic needs. And at the same time, that same caregiver is perpetrating violence in the home that shouldn't take place, right? And so understanding why that would take place, a child just internalizes it, said it must be me. And I did the same.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really curious on how you ended up at boarding school because that sounds like I know there's some dysfunctional in schools where there's trauma and drama, but the way you phrased it sounded like a lifeline. On earth did you end up at one? How did you get in? What was the process?
Oh, it absolutely was a lifeline. My father had gone to a small boarding school in southern West Virginia called Greenbrier Military School, and it was closed by the time that I got to high school. And so my father had experience in boarding school that he always talked about when I was growing up. And going through the later parts of grade school and into junior high, my grades really suffered because I was disassociated at school. I was not able to hear what the teachers were teaching. I was trying to make sense of the war going on in my own head. And so constantly I would have teachers who would send notes home saying, I'm lazy, I'm a daydreamer. And as a result, I just checked out of school and I quit trying. And my grades were floundering through junior high, but in ninth grade, I was able to get them up. And that's when my father mentioned, would you ever consider going to a boarding school? And he flew on US Airways, so it's now part of American Airlines, but US Air used to have a magazine that would promote prep schools and boarding schools. And my father frequented the airline to fly for work, and he saw an ad by a school that was close to us in Pennsylvania, and we did an open house, and I liked it. But really, I just wanted out of my home. I didn't care what it was, right? It wouldn't have mattered at this point. And so that was the first chance I got, and I was out. It was the best thing I
Yeah.
ever did.
Do you think this was his way of trying to be helpful too?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. My father was a good man. He was a hardworking person. And on top of dealing with all he dealt with at work, he was having to deal with this dynamic at home. It was not desirable for him either.
Yeah. So I know that you're on a healing path, and how I just intuitively know that is when you wrote your book. I'm assuming that would have been too challenging. It's already challenging, but extremely challenging if you hadn't done any healing work. So
Sure.
I'm assuming that you've done that. But before we get into your healing journey, I want to know if you're married, you have children, how has your past, the way you were parented, impacted your marriage and your children, if you want to talk about that. If it's too
Sure.
sensitive, that's okay.
No, it's not too sensitive, and I feel like this adds value to those listeners you have who may be struggling with that
It's
right now, right? So I see where this is very helpful to them. So I've been married twice. I'm currently married now, and I have two children, one by my first marriage, one by my second. My kids, my oldest one is 20, my youngest one is 7. In my first marriage, I met my first wife at maybe 23 years old, 24 years old. I think we were married at 25, 26. I had a lot of reactions and had dealt with them for about 10 years at that point. A broken fight or flight response, chronic muscle tenseness, or muscle armoring as I know it. I was dealing with hypervigilance, hyperarousal, a lot of insomnia, flashbacks, nightmares, things of this nature. But I didn't connect the dots between them. When I got married for the first time, believe it or not, the symptom that popped out to my first wife was flinching. She would come, I love the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I would watch the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday. And if my wife was upstairs, she'd walk down the stairs and give me a kiss on the head. If I had my back to her, I would flinch. And after a few times, she just said, that's not a natural reaction. I'm just wondering if we should go see a doctor and just talk about it. And so I was encouraged by her and then my best friend to do. And anyway, that started a path of about a decade of misdiagnoses. And I started to really get those symptoms that I had started to really become amplified with the birth of my first son. And I started to seek help from mental health professionals. And I started to take medications that I shouldn't have been taking because I was diagnosed with things I don't have, like depression and anxiety. And it just created a lot of problems. So it wreaked havoc in my first marriage. I had an odd reaction to things. It could be a dog barking. It could be a baby crying on an airplane. It could be feeling trapped in an elevator. And it was hard for my wife really to understand, or even me to understand, because my wife really had the intention, or really had the thought that I could control these things. And I could not control these reactions. And I've learned since that's impossible. When your primitive
Right.
brain acts to protect you, your prefrontal cortex or your rational brain is not going to override it. So it caused a lot of problems, right? And I drank, or started drinking heavily towards the end of my marriage to cover up my symptoms, because I had discovered in college it helped me be more functional in a small window. It would make it harder the next day, but if I drank the next day, I just parlay those feelings into the next and into the next. So I developed an addiction to alcohol on top of that, which was not helpful in my marriage or my life or my interactions with others. But the one thing I didn't want to do is perpetrate what had happened to me to my children. I didn't, I was not a violent person in our home, not to my wife, not to my children. I was dead set that whatever I did, I would hurt myself before I hurt other people. And so by taking that mentality, I think it helped me be a different person than was modeled for me as a young man. And but it created, just having a difficulty, I didn't know what I had. It created a lot of issues for me. So just to kind of wrap it up, I was divorced and single for around a decade after the birth of my first son. And during that time, I ended up getting help for alcohol addiction, getting sober, being diagnosed with complex PTSD, and started to find ways to heal. And my second marriage has had the benefit of that healing. My younger son sees a different man than my older son has, because I hadn't healed with my older son yet. There was a conversation that I had with my oldest in high school, and I just broke down crying, and I said, "Look, this has been my journey. This has been what I've struggled with, and this is why I was a different person when you were a young man." I just put it all on the table, and I said, "I'm sorry, and I'll talk to you about it whenever you want to, however long you want to, or I'll talk about it never again, whatever you prefer. But just understand, I love you no matter what." And that stayed around and got sober because of you, not because I still wanted to stay here. So I think he understood that, but it's anybody who grows up in a traumatic situation deals with that, or the remnants of that, or the shrapnel with that for the rest of their life. There's no hiding it.
Sure. How wonderful that you had that really difficult conversation with him. And
Yes.
may I ask how the relationship between the two of you is now?
Excellent. It's excellent.
Okay.
He's finishing up his sophomore year in college and doing well, and I'm very proud of him.
Yay. It's always a little nerve-wracking asking some of these questions.
Fair enough.
Thanks for asking. It sucks. Right. Okay. Yeah, I loved hearing the dichotomy of the first marriage and the second marriage too, the pre, because yeah, I'm a therapist. I've been a therapist for 28 years, but I'm also a complex trauma survivor. And even I, going into my marriage, didn't realize how much your relationships can be impacted by your trauma history, right? Because I
Right.
thought I had it going on. I was a therapist, lots of clients doing great work, but my own stuff wasn't. It was a long process of healing, right?
That's
As
right.
you cool. I would love to hear more. I heard you say you got sober, so I'm guessing you had some sort of support. Did you try AA or any of those support type groups? Smart
I
recovery.
So when I first started having health problems, basically my liver went into failure at 36, and I started turning white, and I was malnourished, and my liver was not processing vitamins, it was processing alcohol. So when I'd eat, my body would just pass it. It wouldn't register as nutrients. I tried to quit on my own and could not, and I went to rehab for a month. in a facility in Florida. And that's when I was introduced to EMDR. And that's when I was diagnosed with complex PTSD and really started to attack it full force. I'll be honest with you, I was so happy that I was finally diagnosed with what was wrong with me that alcohol became water under the bridge. I went to AA during rehab every day. I was very active in rehab, doing anything I could to keep my mind off of alcohol. But by the time I left the rehab facility, I had no desire to drink again. I was already done with it months before, trying to quit on my own, and I couldn't. And really, I prayed to God, just take the urges away. And He answered that prayer. And so I went to AA a few times when I got back home, but really felt that my anonymity was compromised because it was in a small town where I live.
Sure.
So I didn't take that route. But really, what I did was I leaned into Christianity trying to heal. And I also focused on the complex PTSD. What are all the books I can read? What are the things beyond EMDR that help me heal? And how do I do it? So I just became a junkie for learning how to heal myself and finding the right therapist to go see and mental health professionals. And fortunately, after years and years of taking that approach, I'm a different person.
Beautiful. And you mentioned EMDR, which is evidence-based for trauma, complex trauma. What other modalities have you studied or worked on in therapy that you found
Mhm.
helpful?
Anything that can ground you in the present. That's my biggest challenge. When I get into a flashback or I wake up from a nightmare, I'm in 1987, 1991. I'm not in 2026. And so anything I can do to ground myself in the present, whether it's just slowing my breathing, water splashed on my face, my wrists, my arms, breathing exercises, anything that grounds me in today. Just naming 5 things I can see and 4 I can taste, and so on. Just simple exercises like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It sounds so simple, but yet it's so helpful in the moment. Beyond that, I've mentioned Christianity. It gave me purpose, it gave me peace. It really helped me heal internally and understand that I have a calling on my life. And beyond that, just going and talking with mental health professionals like yourself. Sometimes it's a challenge because not everyone like you wants to open up about how you grew up. But when you're a patient like me who's an engineer and is as far from mental health as you could think, going and seeing a therapist who has had the same experiences as you and speaks the language of, no, this is what it feels like internally. A therapist just trying to treat that who hasn't had that experience themselves can't
Right.
connect that, right? And
Yeah.
so a
Yeah.
lot of it's just researching and finding the right fit for you who speaks your language. That's
Yeah.
what's worked for me.
1,000%. And what's really interesting, I'm not sure if you know this part, but the grounding that you were talking about and the different exercises, those are not considered evidence-based practices for complex trauma, which blows great.
Wow.
So the evidence-based, they're highly researched modalities for trauma. There's only a few of them. Prolonged exposure, cognitive processing therapy, CBT, that's trauma informed, EMDR. Those are the ones that are evidence-based. Like the parts work, the family systems, there's not enough research yet. People are finding it pretty helpful. But the work that you're talking about, complex trauma survivors have to do that, or those top downs will never work
That's right.
because they're so dysregulating.
That's right.
When you start working on it, it just blows the door. People decompensate, their emotions all over the place. The maladaptive really wants to kick in, the drinking, the overeating, the
That's
overspending.
right.
So the grounding, so we call the grounding or somatic work, we call that bottom up. So top down and bottom up, you need to do them together, or you need to really work on the bottom up a while before you start doing the top down, and which is what my specialty is.
That's interesting.
Because I've seen so many people just cannot tolerate therapy, and then they think, oh my God, that's
Yeah.
something else I'm not good at. I'm
Yeah.
failing this too, right?
It
It's
hurts.
a time.
It hurts. Sorry to talk over you, but when
No,
you
you're good.
first go in, and I've forgotten about this because it's been years ago, but when you first go in and open up what has happened to you in your past, it can be very difficult. And if you have an experience of misdiagnosis, or you have an experience where maybe the caregiver just isn't a good fit, it's back to that whole toxic shame modality of it's just this is more of why I'm a failure as an individual. But it's not failure. Your nervous system is trying to protect you. It loves you, right? And that's what this
Exactly.
is. You just don't forget trauma because trauma isn't a memory.
The whole body is more than your whole body. It's your whole energy field, your spirituality. It's everything. It
Yeah.
affects everything.
I like to say
Trauma affects every area of your life.
it's a defense mechanism that your body learned to protect you.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
And I really love that your faith has been powerful healing
Thank
for
you.
you. I work with a six pillar approach, and spirituality is one of them. Spirituality is a little complex for a lot of my survivors because
Mm.
some survivors also have that church hurt or religious trauma on top of everything else.
Sure.
So it's a system that can be harmful, but also deeply
That's right.
healing.
That's right. That's right. I had those challenges. I grew up Christian. I wondered why God would let me go through this. I left the church for 20 years. I didn't practice. I said no to everybody who invited me for years. And it really took me at rock bottom, just saying, I've got a death diagnosis here, so I might as well go try it to see if it'll work better than what I've been doing. Thank God it did, or I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious about a term that you used earlier. I had not heard of it before. I want to know if you came up with this or if you read about it somewhere. You mentioned muscle armoring.
Okay. So, muscle armoring, the best way I can explain it is I had some altercations with my mother, one in particular that really did harm to my lower back. And from fourth grade until now at 49 years old, I have chronic lower back pain. But when you talk about muscle armoring, it's not, I don't have lower back pain from lifting boxes that were too heavy or by bending over and doing yard work all day. I have that when I get out of the truck after work or when I'm in a stressful situation, my body at times relives some of that trauma. And I will have this hardened muscle tenseness that I don't know if I could get another way. And it's unexplainable really to me because it'll happen in areas that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would my lower back be so armored and so tight that I literally can't move right or left or bend over to touch my toes? But yet I didn't do any physical activity. I didn't tweak it. I wasn't lifting anything heavy, right? So I just didn't understand it. And then, but I had it my whole life. And I would get it up in my shoulders and things that I think it's common for somebody that works in front of a computer to have that tightness or whatever. But this is rock hard, and you couldn't, I would go to get a massage and they couldn't get the stuff out. So, where I learned it and where I picked up on the actual term was in a book by an author by the name of Pete Walker. And he wrote a book, I want to say 20 years ago. I want to say it's
Have it.
Thriving from Complex Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder, something like that. He wrote a few books, and he's a therapist like you, has had the same childhood, and he talks about that childhood, but also the treatment of his patients. And it was a good book for me just to understand the disorder and how it pervades every aspect of your life.
Yeah, I think his work is amazing. I don't remember reading though the muscle armoring, which is, and maybe I underlined it. I read a lot, but I've had it my whole life too, so it just really
Yeah.
resonated with me. Yeah, and I remember one little Asian dude when my neck and my back were just stone, and he was like sweating profusely trying to work it out. And one time the tension was so bad in my neck when I couldn't move my neck at all, the doctor actually started an IV drip with Valium in it to
Oh,
loosen it up.
wow.
Yeah, so
Wow.
yeah, I totally relate to everything you're talking about and
Yeah.
learning that it was based on my trauma. And I also, too, in the book, The Body Keeps the Score, our bodies don't forget anything. And that's why we can have chronic health conditions, right?
That's right. Bessel van der Kolk really opened my eyes to my disorder. He's an excellent
Yeah.
author.
Another author that talks a lot about the body, physical health after trauma is Nadine Gay Harris. It's called The Deepest.
Okay.
Nadine Burke Harris. I'm sorry. She used to be the Secretary of Health at one point.
Okay. I've not read her book.
It's called The Deepest. She has a
Okay.
TED Talk too, and she found the connection with inner city kids that had a lot of trauma in their lives. She was seeing unprecedented asthma in that population. And so
Yeah.
when she started interviewing, she found out a lot of them had trauma. And then when she went to study it further, there's all kinds, of course. It could
Wow.
be, you can get any autoimmune disorder. A lot of my complex trauma survivors have a lot of mobility issues because of their traumas.
I'm
Yeah.
thankful I don't have a lot of mobility issues, but I have the autoimmune challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
just lately, and asthma.
gut health is another. Again, it can be anything, but neurological migraines. If you think about it, if your body's so tight, it's amazing we actually don't have even more problems, right?
I
So,
agree. I agree. I'll take the ones I have and be thankful.
yeah, but the grounding work helps us to soften our bodies, which also helps release some of that toxic stress. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that as well. Okay, so we are coming up on time. So out of all the different things you've tried in your healing journey, your faith, the grounding, the EMDR, the rehab, all the other states, all the reading you do. You're a bibliotherapist, essentially. You've read all the books. What has been the most, or the number one most helpful thing for you?
Having hope. Having hope. And that's something that I started to pick up at rehab. I've been sober for 13 years and change. Hope was the biggest catalyst by far, because without hope, you don't have a reason to try again tomorrow, right? Without hope, you don't have the courage to face old wounds. And there's a couple things that are coming to mind with hope. One in particular is a quote by Desmond Tutu that hope is being able to see there's light despite all the darkness. In every healing journey, whether it's addiction or whether it's a complex PTSD, and those are the two big ones in my world, but I'm sure you can apply it to
Yep.
anything. Without the catalyst of hope, without being able to see the positive, that there's a chance to have a brighter future, that there's a whisper in your head that says, keep going. Without that hope, I believe all's lost. So you have to have hope. Hope is, it needs to be in the driver's seat for your world, and you have to find a way to harness it. And it's difficult, but if you can, it makes the other things worth doing.
Thank you. So, John, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on my show today. And people listening, I hope you purchase John's book, Invisible Wounds. If anything else, it's going to really validate those of you who have really had dysfunctional, traumatic childhoods. You're going to feel like, oh, you're going to get some nuggets of wisdom that will help you on your healing journey. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening in today. Please join us next week, same day and time. Also, I would love for you to check out my website, healthrivedream.com.